A lot of the focus leading up into this season, especially in training camp, has been the focus and the development of the young players for the Chicago Bulls. But on today's episode, I want to talk about what the expectations are for the Chicago Bulls coaching staff so they can make sure that we have a successful season. And I will let you guys know where the Chicago Bulls rank in Bleacher Report's latest power rankings. All that on today's show. We're going to talk about it, but you gotta hear the music first.
Cognac gang.
Shy Bulls podcast with the Cognac Boys. I'm Cognac Boy Bobby, and I'm holding it down on today's daily episode. If you're tuned in with me today, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell as well. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I talked about the player development that is a necessity for a lot of players on this Chicago Bulls team. Talked about the chemistry that they had to have, and just to see if these guys can go ahead and kind of exceed some expectations that have been placed on the players of this Chicago Bulls team. But I want to focus on the coaching staff of this Chicago Bulls team. For me personally, I know that the list of coaches that's going to be involved and other personnel that's going to be involved is much larger than the four people that I'm going to point out on today's episode. On today's episode, my focus is going to be on Billy Donovan, Wes Unseld Jr., Dan Craig, and Peter Patton. Those guys are a part of the coaching staff in some way, form, or fashion. That's your Billy Donovan, Wes Unseld Jr., and Dan Craig. And then I included Peter Patton in this because he's the director for player development. So just to talk about Billy Donovan, him as the head coach, I believe he has to have a set plan to where he could be the lead dog in the locker room to guide this ship in the right direction. There has already been questions in regards to Billy Donovan on how a lot of us Chicago Bulls fans feel about him, but he is here. However long he's going to be here, we don't know. But for the moment is this is the guy that's going to be leading the new era of the Chicago Bulls, the youth movement of the Chicago Bulls. So everything, every problem, every positive, every negative that we have, every question that we have is going to directly fall at the feet of Billy Donovan. Hence why he has to be the number one guy. And we have to set the expectations for him as let's see a better Chicago Bulls team. And what we mean by that is not going to automatically jump to the win total, but it's going to talk about how are you placing guys in the proper position. I added Wes Unseld Jr. to this is because he has a long coaching record that started out with Washington. He went on to spend some time with Golden State, spent some time with the Orlando Magic, spent some time with Denver, and then was a head coach after so many years as an assistant coach in this NBA. What that let me know is that he was good enough to gain the job. Now, hey, it wasn't a great time in Washington, but I will say that sometimes, depending on the situation, depending on the talent that's come that you are that you have to coach right in front of you, sometimes is not always the best talent to where you're going to need wins. I know that the NFL is different to where coaching matters a lot more than the players, but in the NBA, the players matter a little bit more than the coaching. You know what I'm saying? You're never gonna discount the coaching that's required in the NBA, but you absolutely need talent to win in both leagues, respectively. And I also included Dan Craig in this because his coaching career in Miami. We know how Miami, they were, coming from an organization like that. There's a certain mentality that I'm hoping that Dan Craig can now bring over to the Chicago Bulls to where we're like, hey, this is the mindset that we need to have. This is the type of culture we're trying to establish. This is how I look at players and them placing them in positions to succeed. We seen Eric Spoelstra as being the head guy to be able to get the most out of whatever players that he was playing on any given night. We seen him get the most out of those players, regardless if it was a win or a loss. So I'm hoping that Dan Craig can bring some of that into the fold for the Chicago Bulls. And right back to Wes Unseld Jr., I'm looking at him is because when we get the all access video, he's preaching the margins of the game, the limiting mistakes, talking about the defensive end, talking about being where you're supposed to be. So I have to hold all these guys to that standard. And I believe that these are the two guys right behind Billy Donovan that a lot of these players are going to look to for their expertise, for their experience, and from what we've seen from them from many, many years for their time in the NBA. The last person that I'm going to include in this, along with Billy Donovan, Dan Craig, and Wes Unseld Jr., is director of player development, Peter Patton. Peter Patton, I believe, has been solid for the Chicago Bulls for the time that he's been here. We've seen a lot of things, come out of Kobe White. We've seen some things come out for Ayo Dosunmu. We're believing and seeing some type of changes is coming in the direction of Dalen Terry. But one thing that I want to see is how do all these guys come in as a group to enhance these players and these young guys on this squad? We talking about Dalen Terry. We see that the shot looks better, but now that it looks better and the mechanics have improved, can he now become a productive three-point shooter? That's something that's going to be at the feet of Peter Patton and his coaching staff, along with Billy Donovan, Wes Unseld Jr., and Dan Craig. I want to talk about Josh Giddey. Me and CDubb, we were on Locked On Bulls with my man Hayes, and we talked about Josh Giddey. One of my questions to Hayes while we were guesting over there was, how important is the relationship of Peter Patton and Josh Giddey going to be this season? Now, my man's Hayes, he threw out a great point. He was like, well, Josh Giddey, he's just new to the team, didn't, played in the Olympics, probably took some time off, did some individual workouts. So it might not have been much of a working relationship established enough right now for Josh Giddey and Peter Patton, which is a fair point. But I like to continue the conversation to say that if the Chicago Bulls want to maximize Josh Giddey and his talents, they have to develop him in a way that is best suitable for the team. And it's not going to only be facilitating offense. It's not going to only be setting guys up or pushing the pace. It's going to have to come with him being some type of threat in the scoring department. We know that he's a solid attacker of the basketball, but can you stretch the floor out? Can you continue that improvement with the three-point shot? Last year, Josh Giddey shot 33%. Can you build on that? Can you improve on that? That's going to be key from all guys involved. And then I'm looking at Julian Phillips, dealing with some injury. How do you get him acclimated? And what's the next steps for him? That's up for them to decide. Because as of right now, for Julian Phillips, I'm saying is a guy that's hella athletic. I'm saying a guy that can do some things on the defensive end. On the offensive end, I'm seeing a much more of a slasher and maybe a guy that you're trying to shove into the corner for three-point shots. But I don't think that Julian Phillips is just limited to that. So how do you get more out of that young player? And then you already know the top priority for anything is going to start with Montez Buzelis. This is a young kid that comes in with a mentality like any other we've seen in the last few years, especially from a rookie that walked through the doors of the Chicago Bulls organization. You cannot mishandle this. You, as the Chicago Bulls, cannot mishandle Montez Buzelis. I don't think that he himself as the person will allow it, but he ain't got control over when he's going to play, how he's going to play, what's going to be the goal set for him while he's playing, and how do you ensure that you touch up on those mistakes that you're going to see? Do you just yank him out of the game, coach him up a little bit and tell him to sit down? Or do you pull him to the side, give him a little criticism, throw him back out there and see if he doesn't make that same mistake again? Because mistakes will be made. So that's going to be placed right at the foot of this coaching staff. What's a successful season going to look like for all these guys involved? Me personally, we can automatically look to the win totals, but I don't think it's just limited right there. I think that's right there on the surface. Again, we talking about how will the players look? How will the team look as a whole, who's going to get are you going to play the best players? Are you going to stick to the politics of what's on your team with the veteran guys? We know Billy Donovan loves to stick with his veterans. Are they going to receive precedence over the younger players for the sake of saying he's a veteran guy, we trust him, da 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 da? These guys got to figure out how are you going to ensure that things are flowing well and there is continual improvement. We already have questions on the defensive side. We got to fix it. We have questions on the offensive side. We got to make sure we correct them. We're talking about youth and experience that doesn't appear to be a lot when you talk about this team. How do you fix that? And then the biggest thing is, how do you monitor your Zach LaVine situation? I believe he's bought in. I believe he's good to go. But is there a hidden agenda? And I'm not trying to make it seem like it's something negative, but is there a partnership that's working between Zach camp and the Bulls camp to say, hey, the ultimate goal is to, you know what I'm saying? Or are you in more of a we'll wait and see what happens type of move? I believe that's where the Chicago Bulls are. So for the time being, these guys got to make sure that it is working as best as it could until you have to either stay the course or pivot on to something else. And then the last thing, how do you monitor Nikola Vucevic? Is this a type of situation to where we looking at Nikola Vucevic and we're trying to get him out of the building? Or is that another wait and see opportunity? Is this something that you look at to say, hey, we willing to keep Zach, but we got to get rid of Vooch, or vice versa? That's something that they're going to absolutely have to figure out. The expectations for this coaching staff is not going to be at the surface levels of win totals, because you can win 35 games, but if we don't feel like the improvement of the team is for the sake of the future to make sure we are championship contenders, then it's all for nothing. It's all for nothing. Let me know your comments and everything down below regarding that topic, and what type of expectations are you placing on the Chicago Bulls coaching staff. Now, before we get up out of here, I want to give you guys the Chicago Bulls latest power ranking according to Bleacher Report. According to Bleacher Report, the Chicago Bulls currently rank 24th in their latest preseason power rankings, right ahead of the Charlotte Hornets, who are at 25, and right behind of the Toronto Raptors, who come in at 23, and the Atlanta Hawks that come in at 22. Look, I can go ahead and push back and forth with you all to say that the Chicago Bulls should be moved further up, at least to 22, where the Hawks are, above the Hawks and the Raptors. I'm not here to do that today. It's okay. It's just the preseason power rankings that's going off suggestions, you know what I'm saying, or opinions. And it's okay. The Chicago Bulls, this variation of the Chicago Bulls have improved anything. What we believe on paper is solid, but until they get on the court and actually play, that's when we'll be able to have a better conclusion of if this team is better than a 24th place team or worse than a 24th place team. And only time will tell on where the Chicago Bulls will fall once we start playing the basketball games. You let me know your thoughts and everything down there below as well on the Bulls power rankings. But ladies and gentlemen, that is it for me today. Wanted to give you all some of that fire that's been on my mind. But nonetheless, before you get up out of here, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and then if you want to be a part of our mailbag episodes that happens every weekend, call in, state your name, leave your take on anything Chicago Bulls. The number to do so is 773-242-9219. Appreciate y'all, Bulls Nation. Make sure you always see red. And y'all already know I'm going to catch y'all on the next one for sure.
Cognac.